My name is Zainab Taijik. I am 33 years old, and on December 25th, 2024, I was supposed to die. I was sitting in a cell at Charki prison. My execution was scheduled for sunrise. In less than 7 hours, a firing squad was going to end my life. My crime was posting a 4-minute video on Instagram, a video of me celebrating Christmas with Pakistani maids and Kenyan laborers in a hidden basement, a video where I declared that I, Zainab Taijik, daughter of one of the most influential families in the nation, had abandoned Islam and given my life to Jesus Christ. My father had disowned me. My name had been erased from family records. The religious tribunals had pronounced me guilty of apostasy, and the punishment for apostasy in Afghanistan was death. No appeals, no mercy, no second chances. But I was not afraid. Not anymore. Because what the judges did not know, what my father could not understand, what the entire country had failed to see, was that I had already met the one they said did not exist. I had looked into his eyes. I had heard his voice. And he had made me a promise. I was raised in Houston, Texas, educated at Stanford University, born into the Afghan elite. And on that freezing night in my prison cell, everything I thought I knew about life and death and God was about to change forever. This is my testimony. The story of how I went from mansion to prison, from heiress to outcast, from Islam to Christ, and how Jesus himself walked into my cell on the night before my execution and changed everything. My father, Amir Faisal Taijik, was a senior member of the ruling elite, not in the direct line of power, but close enough to matter, close enough to own estates on 3 continents, close enough to send his wife and only daughter to live in America, while he managed family affairs in the homeland. Education. He told relatives who questioned why his daughter was being raised among the Westerners. The best education in the world is in America. She will return when the time is right. So, I grew up in a 7-bedroom house in the River Oaks area of Houston. I had a chauffeur who took me to school, a housekeeper named Maria who taught me Spanish slang when my mother wasn't listening, a gardener named Ahmed who came from Bangladesh and always saved the brightest roses for my room. But outside our gates, I was just Zainab, not heiress, not Taijik, just Zainab with long black hair who was decent at volleyball and awful at algebra. My best friend was Emily Thompson, a bubbly, red-haired girl from a Methodist family who lived 2 blocks away. We met at a community barbecue when we were 8. She asked why I wasn't eating the ribs. I said pork was haram. She asked what haram meant. I explained. She shrugged and handed me a plate of chips instead. We were inseparable after that. Emily's family took me to church sometimes. Not to convert me. They knew I was Muslim. But when I slept over on Saturday nights, Sunday morning meant Grace Methodist Church with the Thompson family. My mother surprisingly allowed it. She said, experiencing other cultures makes a person worldly. I remember sitting in those cushioned seats, watching people clap during songs, watching them bow their heads in prayer, watching Pastor Michael talk about someone named Jesus, like he was a neighbor who stopped by for coffee. I didn't understand it, but something about it intrigued me. After church, Emily's mother would make waffles shaped like stars. Her father would read the comics and call me sport like I was one of his own. Her little sister would pester us until we played tag in the backyard. It felt like family in a way my own family never quite did. When I turned 12, my father summoned me to Kabul for the summer. I remember landing at Hamid Karzai International Airport. The dust hit me like a storm when we stepped off the plane dry, choking, so different from Houston's muggy air. A fleet of armored land cruisers waited on the tarmac. Men in traditional shalwar kameez and turbans stood at attention. They didn't look at me. They looked past me. I was carrying cargo to be transported. The family compound had not changed, still fortified, still vast, still filled with aunts who hugged me tightly and uncles who patted my head approvingly at how much I'd grown. But I had changed. I walked into the women's section wearing shorts and a t-shirt from an Ariana Grande concert. My cousin Layla stared at me like I'd sprouted wings. "You dress like an American," she whispered. I am American, I said, because that was how I felt. My passport said Afghan. My blood said Taijik. But my heart said Houston. That summer, I learned what it meant to be a woman in Afghanistan. I could not leave the compound without a male escort. I could not drive. I could not interact with men outside the family. I could not worship freely. I could not question. I could not defy. I watched my aunts glide through the halls like elegant shadows, existing but not thriving, visible but not heard. One afternoon, I found my grandmother alone in the courtyard. She was elderly then, her face a tapestry of lines carved by years of quiet resilience. She was reciting the Quran under the shade of a pomegranate tree. "Grandmother," I asked, "were you ever unhappy here?" She looked up at me with eyes that held mysteries I'd never uncover. "Happiness is surrender to Allah's plan," she said. "That is what the mullah teaches. That is the truth. Unhappiness comes from desiring what is not destined for you." I nodded like I agreed, but inside, something fractured. I returned to Houston with a burden I couldn't label. Freshman year, sophomore year, high school graduation. I walked across the stage at Lamar High School and received my diploma. My mother wept. My father watched via video call from Kabul, his image grainy but pleased. I enrolled at Stanford University in California Political Science, International Affairs. I told myself I was preparing for something I didn't fully grasp yet, but I was absorbing knowledge. I learned about human rights, about feminist revolutions, about religious liberty as a cornerstone of thriving societies. I read about reformers who transformed their nations from the inside, women who refused silence, leaders who paid dearly but shifted paradigms. I began posing risky questions. Why were Afghan women restricted until recent reforms? Why were churches forbidden? Why could Christians come to work but not pray openly? Why was leaving Islam punishable by death? My professors fueled my inquisitiveness. My American friends championed my zeal. Emily, now studying education in Houston, called me every weekend and said I was going to revolutionize the world. For the first time, I believed I might. Then the summons arrived. I was 22, completing my master's thesis on religious diversity in Central Asia. My phone vibrated during a lecture at the Hoover Library. "Father." I stepped outside into the crisp October breeze. "It is time," he said. "No hello, no affection, just decree." "Time for what, Baba?" "Time for you to return home. Your studies are finished. Your responsibilities commence." I stood there, breath visible in the California fall, watching students hurry by with laptops and lattes, and lives they directed. "Baba, this is not negotiable, Zainab. You are Taijik. The nation requires its daughters. I expect you in Kabul before the year ends." He disconnected. I stood there for 13 minutes. I know because I stared at the timer on my phone, waiting for sensation to return to my limbs. Everything I'd constructed, every bond, every liberty, every Sunday waffle and Saturday slumber party, and evening debating policy in cafes vanished. Emily sobbed when I told her. We sat in her cozy teaching program dorm in Houston, and she held me while I feigned composure. "Visit whenever you can," she said. "Promise me." I promised. 4 weeks later, I boarded an Afghan air flight from San Francisco International. 18 hours later, I landed in Kabul. The dust assaulted me like a barrier. The armored convoy awaited on the tarmac. The men in shalwar kameez gazed through me. But this time, something shifted. This time, I wasn't a bewildered child. This time, I was a woman with a purpose. I would transform this nation. I would advocate for rights. I would become the advocate for the voiceless. I just didn't realize yet how steep that purpose would cost me, or who would ultimately rescue me from the ultimate toll. The first morning I woke in Kabul as a permanent resident, I lay in bed for 25 minutes, gazing at the ornate ceiling. Gold leaf adorned the walls. Satin sheets enveloped my form. The generator hummed steadily, because power outages were common, even in our compound. Everything was opulent. Everything was oppressive. I reached for my phone and scrolled through Instagram. Emily had posted a snapshot from a coffee run with her classmates. Lattes and bagels and smiles captured in digital form. A world I no longer inhabited. I liked the photo and set my phone aside. Outside my window, the cobble skyline loomed toward the mountains. Minarets and satellite dishes, and the vow of a rebuilding country. My father often spoke of national progress, how Afghanistan was evolving, how the globe would soon witness a renewed face of our people. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to think my return was part of something grander than familial duty, that perhaps, just perhaps, I could contribute to the transformation. My initial month back was a whirlwind of familial duties. Suppers with distant relatives whose faces I scarcely recalled. Chai sessions with aunts who scrutinized my features for traces of Western decay. Presentations to suitable cousins from allied clans because an heiress my age should contemplate marriage. I smiled through it all. I assented at appropriate intervals. I donned the hijab and burqa without protest. But inwardly, I was observing. I noted how the women around me maneuvered their unseen confines, how they exercised subtle influence through murmurs and hints, how they shaped outcomes without seeming to initiate them. My grandmother had been correct about one aspect. Endurance here demanded a unique fortitude, not the vocal activist strength I'd acquired in America, but something subtler, something enduring. I resolved to master their dialect and then employ it to alter everything. 4 months into my repatriation, I sought an audience with my father. This was unconventional for daughters. We awaited invitations. We did not issue them, but I'd rehearsed my strategy meticulously. I presented it as craving his insight, his counsel, his approval for a modest initiative I wished to launch. He met me in his office, a chamber stocked with volumes he seldom perused and relics from journeys he rarely mentioned. He sat behind an oak desk the size of a sedan. I sat opposite like an interviewee, which in essence I was. I told him I desired to establish a charity, an organization dedicated to literacy for disadvantaged youth, utterly harmless, utterly conventional, the sort of pursuit heiresses undertook to occupy time before wedlock. He regarded me for an extended moment. I maintained a composed expression, my hands steady. At last, he inclined his head. "Proceed," he said, "but recall your identity. All you undertake mirrors this family, this nation. Do not disgrace us." I vowed I would not. The charity was authentic. I named it Noor Foundation. We constructed learning centers in remote villages. We offered grants for girls from impoverished households. We accomplished real good, but Noor was also my facade, my means to traverse segments of Afghan society that heiresses never encountered. I toured hamlets. I encountered clans. I sat in dwellings with earthen floors and heated mothers articulate aspirations for their daughters. And I began observing details. The Pakistani maid who served a household in Herat, clutching a tiny silver cross concealed under her scarf when she believed no one observed. The Bangladeshi chauffeur who requested Friday afternoons off weekly, without rationale. The Somali caregiver who sang melodies I didn't identify, while lulling infants to slumber melodies that evoked hymns. I started focusing on the unseen individuals, the multitudes of migrant workers who sustain the country. Many were Christian. One twilight, I was inspecting a Noor site in a modest district of Kabul. The structure was incomplete. Our local overseer, a compassionate Afghan man named Karim, guided me through partially built rooms, discussing schedules and funds. Then I heard it. Singing, faint yet distinct, emanating from behind the edifice. Karim heard it as well. His demeanor altered, grew wary. "It is nothing, miss," he said. "Merely the laborers." But I was already advancing toward the sound. Around the bend, in a narrow alcove shielded by building supplies, roughly 12 people had assembled, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, African. They perched in a ring on crates and folded mats. A woman stood centrally, grasping a tattered tome, a Bible. They sang a hymn quietly, vigilantly, scanning for perils. They didn't notice me initially. I stood immobilized, observing. The woman with the Bible commenced speaking. Her English was inflected but lucid. She spoke of someone named Jesus, of compassion, of optimism, of a God who beheld the overlooked and cherished the forsaken. The workers assented. Some dabbed eyes. One man lifted his palms skyward. Then someone detected me, a young Pakistani girl. She inhaled sharply. The singing ceased. Dread propagated across their countenances like a blaze. They recognized what I symbolized. An Afghan, an heiress, someone who could ruin their existences with one call. The woman with the Bible advanced. Her hands quivered, but her tone was firm. "Please, madam," she said, "we are merely praying. We intend no wrong. We will cease. Please do not inform." I regarded their visages. 12 souls whose sole offense was adoring their deity. 12 souls who could be detained, confined, expelled. Their kin abroad relied on their wages. Their offspring attended classes due to remittances from this alien soil. And they hazarded all for a moment of devotion behind a construction zone. I recalled Emily, Sunday mornings at Grace Methodist, star-shaped waffles, a belief I'd witnessed, but never comprehended. I saw nothing, I murmured. I was never present. The alleviation on their faces shattered something within me. I departed swiftly before they could express gratitude, before I could reconsider, before I could wholly digest what I'd beheld. That evening, sleep evaded me. I kept envisioning their expressions, the terror, the devotion, how they grasped hope amid adversity. I activated my laptop and researched clandestine churches in Afghanistan. Information wasn't difficult to locate if you knew the sources. Thousands of Christians convened covertly nationwide in cellars, in attics, in rear chambers of shops. They gambled incarceration, banishment, occasionally worse, all for prayer rights. I pondered my Stanford lessons. Religious liberty as an essential human entitlement, the hallmark of civilized communities, the bedrock of genuine acceptance. And I ponder my grandmother's utter happiness is surrender to Allah's plan, but whose rendition of Allah's plan the mullahs, who sermonized loathing of unbelievers the morality enforcers, who pursued worshippers like felons? Or something profounder, more compassionate? I lacked resolutions, but I possessed inquiries. I was discovering were the most perilous possessions. In the ensuing weeks, I invented pretexts to visit Norse sites at unusual times, always aspiring to glimpse the concealed faithful anew. I assured myself it was inquiry, fascination, an heiress examining her land, but profoundly, I knew it was more something I wasn't prepared to designate. I initiated dialogues with Christian laborers when possible. Casual chat initially, where do you hail from, how long here, family home, they were guarded at first, dubious of an Afghan woman querying, but gradually they disclosed. Sarah was the first to genuinely confide, a Pakistani woman in her 50s who cleaned at one of our centers. She'd been in Afghanistan 15 years. Her spouse and 4 kids resided in Lahore. She visited biennially when flights were affordable. She remitted 75% of her earnings to Pakistan. Her youngest son was entering college thanks to that. I inquired once how she endured separation from loved ones, laboring intensely for scant reward. She beamed and touched the concealed cross under her scarf. "Jesus grants me fortitude," she said plainly. "He accompanies me. Even here, even solitary, he is beside me." I yearned to comprehend that the assurance in her tone, the serenity in her gaze. How could someone with so little possess such faith? How could someone so distant from home feel so companioned? I had all Sarah lacked. Affluence, prestige, kin nearby. Yet I was the isolated one. I was the seeker of an unnameable void. Sarah must have perceived my yearning. One day, she slipped a tiny item into my palm, a creased note with an address. "Friday night," she murmured. "If you wish comprehension, come witness yourself." She departed before I could reply. I clutched the note like it scorched. An address, and summons, a threshold I wasn't certain to cross. That night, I unfolded the note countless times, memorized the address, contemplated every motive to discard it. I was Zainab Taijik. I was Muslim. I was elite. I had all to forfeit. But I also recollected the singing, the weeping, the woman with trembling hands and resolute voice. I desired their knowledge. I desired their sensation. The note remained in my pocket. Friday night arrived. I informed my driver I was seeing a relative. He didn't interrogate heiresses. He deposited me 4 blocks away, and I said I'd summon when ready. I walked the remainder, heart thumping, hands clammy, feeling like a culprit nearing a felony. The address was a nondescript house in a humble area. Nothing noteworthy, nothing to draw scrutiny. I ascended to the entrance. I lingered outside for 6 full minutes. I could hear low voices inside, gentle tunes, united chants. My hand shook as I knocked. The door parted. Sarah stood there, her face illuminated with a grin. "You arrived," she said. "I prayed you would." She grasped my hand and guided me inside to a space with about 25 people, Pakistani, Indian, Kenyan, Somali, visages of diverse hues, bound by unseen ties. They gazed at me, an Afghan woman in a hijab, an anomaly among them. But no one fled. No one was alarmed. A sturdy Kenyan man advanced. His aura commanded without insistence. "Welcome, sister," he said. "I am Pastor Joseph Mwangi. You are secure here. We are all kin in this haven." I parted my lips to elucidate, to specify I was merely observing, curious, not theirs. But the words falter because standing in that cramped, crowded house, encircled by folks who had every cause to dread me yet opted to embrace me, I felt something absent since departing America. Pastor Joseph Mwangi gestured toward an empty cushion in the far corner of the room. I sat down carefully, still not entirely sure why I had come, still not certain what I hoped to find. The house was modest, perhaps 50 square meters, but somehow 25 people fit, without feeling crowded. They sat on cushions, on folded blankets, on the bare floor. Children rested quietly on laps. The air carried the scent of tea, sweat, and something indefinable, something warm, something alive. Sarah settled beside me. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze, as though promising that everything would be all right. I wanted to believe her. Pastor Joseph moved to the front of the room. He carried a Bible so well used that the spine was reinforced with tape, and the edges of the pages had darkened from countless fingers. This was not a book that lived on a shelf. This was a book that had been carried through hardship, prayed through tears, underlined in desperation. He opened it and began to read. His voice was rich and measured, carrying the cadence of his Kenyan homeland. He read from the Gospel of John, words I had never truly heard before, words about a light that shone in the darkness, a light the darkness could not overcome, words about a word that was with God, that was God, that became flesh and lived among us. The room listened in profound silence. Even the smallest children remained still. I watched the faces around me as he spoke. A Pakistani mother in her 30s wiped tears from her cheeks without shame. An Indian man closed his eyes and moved his lips in silent agreement. A Somali teenager nodded slowly with each sentence. They were not merely hearing words. They were receiving something that reached far deeper than ears. I did not yet understand what that something was, but I wanted it more than I had ever wanted anything in my life. After the reading, they sang. No instruments, no amplification, just voices rising together in a language that crossed borders. The song was simple. Amazing Grace. I did not know all the words, but I felt their weight. Sarah beside me sang with her eyes closed. Her voice cracked on the higher notes, but there was a purity to it that made my throat tighten. I thought of the prayers I had grown up reciting, formal, beautiful, rhythmic, always in Arabic, always accompanied by precise movements, always shadowed by the fear of imperfection. This was different. These people were not performing for God. They were not earning points or checking obligations. They were speaking to someone they loved, someone they believed loved them in return. The difference struck me like cold water. When the singing ended, Pastor Joseph spoke again. This time he did not read from scripture. He told a story from his own life. He spoke of growing up in a Nairobi slum, of losing his older brother to gang violence at 16, of the rage that had nearly destroyed him. He spoke of a missionary nurse who gave him a Bible and told him that Jesus could heal even the most shattered heart. He spoke of the night he finally opened that Bible and read about a God who sent his own son to die for sinners, a son who forgave the very people who crucified him. He spoke of kneeling on a dirt floor in a one-room shack and giving everything, his anger, his pain, his future, to Jesus. He spoke of the peace that flooded him that night, a peace that had never left him, not even here, not even in a country where speaking these words could cost him his freedom. I sat frozen. His story echoed in places inside me I had not known existed. I, too, had lost something, not a brother to violence, but a version of myself, the American Zainab, who made her own choices, who laughed freely, who dreamed without permission. She had died the moment I boarded that flight from San Francisco, and I had been mourning her ever since. Pastor Joseph spoke of a God who saw the broken, who loved the lost, who came not for the healthy but for the sick. Was I sick? I had never considered myself that way. I was Zainab Taijik. I had everything, yet sitting in that small room surrounded by people who possessed almost nothing, I realized I was the poorest person present. They had something I lacked, something money could not buy, something family name could not provide. After the service, people spoke quietly, embraced one another, prayed together in small groups. Pastor Joseph approached me. His eyes were kind but piercing. He saw more than I wanted him to see. "Do you have questions?" he asked. I had hundreds, but I did not know where to begin. So I asked the simplest one, "Who is Jesus?" He smiled, not condescendingly, but like a man who had been waiting for someone to ask exactly that. He sat on the cushion across from me and began to explain. He told me that Jesus was the Son of God, born of a virgin in Bethlehem, fully God and fully man. He lived a sinless life, healed the sick, raised the dead, taught about love and forgiveness and a kingdom not of this world. Then he was crucified, nailed to a Roman cross for crimes he did not commit. But his death was not a mistake. It was a sacrifice, the payment for every sin ever committed by every human who ever lived. I interrupted him. In Islam, we believed in Isa Jesus, but only as a prophet, never as the Son of God. Certainly not as God himself. To call a man God was shirk, the greatest sin, unforgivable. Pastor Joseph nodded slowly. He did not argue. He did not try to force me. He simply said he understood that many people struggled with this truth, that faith was never coerced, but always offered. Then he asked me a question that lodged itself in my heart like a splinter. If God wanted to show humanity how much he loved them, how would he do it? Would he send a book? Would he send a prophet? Or would he come himself? I had no answer. He reached into a small bag and handed me something, a pocket New Testament, compact, easy to conceal. "Start with John," he said. "Read it slowly. Ask God to show you who he is, and come back whenever you wish." I left the house at 9:45 p.m. My driver waited 4 blocks away. He did not ask where I had been. On the drive home, I held the small Bible against my chest beneath my hijab. It felt like carrying dynamite. If anyone discovered it, everything would collapse. My father, my family, my future, gone in a heartbeat. But I could not discard it. That night, I locked my bedroom door, drew every curtain, turned on soft music to cover any sound, and opened the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read the sentence 5 times. In Islam, Allah has no partners, no equals, no son. Yet here was a book declaring that the Word was God, and that this Word became flesh and dwelt among us. I should have closed it. I should have burned it. I should have reported Pastor Joseph and his little congregation. Instead, I kept reading. For the next 4 months, I returned every Friday evening. I invented new excuses for my driver each time. A sick relative, a charity inspection, a meeting with a village elder. He never questioned. Each gathering I sat in my corner and drank in everything: the songs, the prayers, the teaching, the testimonies of believers who shared how Jesus had transformed their lives. A Pakistani nurse who had contemplated suicide before finding faith. An Indian mechanic who forgave the uncle who stole his inheritance. A Somali widow who lost her son to war, but found peace that surpassed understanding. Story after story of fractured people made whole. Each testimony was a hammer blow against the walls I had so carefully constructed. Every night I read the New Testament in secret. John, then Matthew, Mark, Luke, the letters of Paul. I could not stop. The words were unlike anything I had ever encountered. They spoke of grace unearned, undeserved love, a God who pursued people rather than waiting to be pursued, a love that reached down into the deepest places of shame and failure. One night I reached Romans 5 verse 8, but God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. I read it again and again. While we were still sinners, not after we cleaned ourselves up, not after we earned favor, not after we became worthy, while we were broken, rebellious, lost, he died for us anyway. The words pierced me. I slid from my bed to the floor, still holding the small Bible, and for the first time in my life, I spoke directly to Jesus, not as a prophet, not as a distant figure, but as someone alive, someone listening. I told him I was afraid. I told him I did not fully understand everything I was reading. I told him I knew what it would cost me if I chose this path. And then I asked him if he was real to show me. That night, in the silence of my room, something shifted. It was not dramatic. No light filled the room. No voice thundered from heaven. But a quiet certainty settled over me, gentle as dawn. The months following my surrender to Jesus were a whirlwind of hidden joy and growing conviction. I continued attending the Friday gatherings at the Modest House, but now I went not as an observer but as a participant. I sang the hymns with a voice that grew stronger each week. I prayed aloud when the group shared requests. I even began sharing small testimonies of my own, how a verse from Scripture had brought peace during a tense family dinner, or how Jesus' words about forgiveness helped me release resentment toward the restrictions of my life in Kabul. Pastor Joseph noticed the change in me. One evening after the service, he pulled me aside. "Zainab," he said, his eyes twinkling with fatherly pride, "the light in you is shining brighter. What has happened?" I told him about that night in my room, the quiet moment when I had asked Jesus to reveal himself, the certainty that settled in my heart. He nodded, smiling. "That is the Holy Spirit," he explained. "He comes to those who seek with an open heart. Welcome fully to the family of God." From then on, he mentored me personally. We would stay after the others left, discussing passages that puzzled me. Why did Jesus emphasize loving enemies? How could grace cover even the worst? Since Pastor Joseph answered patiently, drawing from his own experiences in Kenya and the challenges of ministering in Afghanistan. He warned me that faith here came with risks, that many in the group had faced harassment, job loss, even threats from authorities. But he also reminded me of Jesus' promise, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world." I took his words to heart. At home, I hid my New Testament in a secret compartment beneath my jewelry box. I memorized verses during long afternoons when family obligations left me alone. And through the Noor Foundation, I found ways to subtly support the underground believers subtly. A scholarship for a Pakistani cleaner's daughter, extra supplies for a Kenyan laborer's family, small acts that masked my growing allegiance. But as my faith deepened, so did my restlessness. Afghanistan's laws were unforgiving toward apostates. Churches were illegal. Christian materials were contraband. Foreign workers like those in our group lived in constant fear of deportation or worse. I saw it in their eyes each Friday, the way they glanced at the door during prayers, the hushed tones even in our hidden space. I began researching more deeply, using encrypted browsers on my laptop to learn about persecuted Christians worldwide. Stories from Iran, North Korea, Somalia, believers imprisoned, tortured, executed for their faith. It broke my heart and fueled my resolve. If I, with my privilege and position, did nothing, who would? Sarah became my closest confidant in the group. We met outside the gathering sometimes, under the guise of "nor business." She would slip me notes with prayer requests or Bible verses. One day, as we walked through a market inspecting potential sites for a new learning center, she shared her own story. She had come to Afghanistan fleeing poverty in Lahore, leaving behind a husband who drank too much and children who depended on her remittances. I was angry at God for years, she admitted. Why me, why this life? But then a co-worker invited me to a secret meeting, much like ours. I heard about Jesus suffering, how he was betrayed, beaten, crucified. If the Son of God could endure that for me, how could I not trust him with my hardships? Her words resonated. I confessed my own struggles, the emptiness of palace life, the pressure to marry a cousin I barely knew, the fear that my American education would amount to nothing in a society that silenced women. Sarah listened, then prayed for me right there in the bustling market. Her words whispered like a secret code. It was Sarah who first mentioned Christmas. As December approached, the group buzzed with quiet excitement. They spoke of celebrating the birth of Jesus, even if it meant risking exposure. We can't have trees or lights, Pastor Joseph explained during one service, but we can gather, sing carols, share the story of the manger. It's a reminder that God entered our broken world humbly. As a child, I had never celebrated Christmas. In Houston, Emily's family had invited me to their festivities once or twice, cookies shaped like reindeer, gifts under a twinkling tree, stories of Santa mixed with the nativity. But it had felt like a cultural event, not spiritual. Now, hearing the group plan their hidden observance, something stirred in me. I wanted to be part of it fully, not just as an attendee, but as someone who could amplify their voices. The idea came gradually. What if I documented our celebration? What if I shared it with the world? My Instagram account had thousands of followers, mostly family connections and old friends from Stanford. A video could expose the reality of underground Christians in Afghanistan, call for religious freedom, and declare my own faith publicly. The risks were enormous: disownment, arrest, death. But the pull was stronger. Jesus had not hidden his light. Why should I? I confided in Pastor Joseph first. We met in a quiet corner after a service. I want to record us on Christmas, I said. Show the world what happens here. But I won't do it without your blessing. He was silent for a long moment, his face etched with concern. Zainab, you know what this could mean. For you, for all of us. I nodded. I do. But if we stay silent, nothing changes. Jesus said we are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. He smiled faintly, quoting the verse back to me. Then he prayed, asking for wisdom and protection. If this is God's leading, he said finally, then proceed. But blur our faces. Protect the flock. The group agreed reluctantly, their trust in me outweighing their fear. We planned carefully. The Christmas gathering would be in the same house, but with extra precautions, rotating lookouts. No children to minimize risk. Sarah helped me prepare, teaching me carols like Silent Night and "O Come All Ye Faithful" I practiced in my room at night, humming under my breath. As the day approached, my nerves grew. Family obligations filled my schedule: holiday feasts, visits from relatives, discussions about potential suitors. My father watched me closely, as if sensing something amiss. You seem distracted, Zainab, he said one evening over dinner. Is the foundation overwhelming you? I forced a smile. No, Baba. Just thinking about ways to expand our work. He nodded approvingly, but his eyes lingered. Christmas Eve arrived. I told my driver I was visiting a Norse site in need of urgent attention. He dropped me blocks away, as usual. I walked through the chilled cobble streets, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. The house was dimly lit. Paper stars hung from strings as makeshift decorations. About 20 people gathered, fewer than usual, but their faces glowed with quiet joy. We began with prayer, thanking God for the gift of His Son, then the singing soft at first, then bolder. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. A little Kenyan boy, perhaps 5, sat on my lap, twisting my bracelet as his mother sang nearby. I looked around at these brave souls, maids, drivers, laborers who risked everything for this moment. They had shown me love when I was a stranger, faith when I was doubting. They deserved freedom. The world needed to see them. After the songs, Pastor Joseph shared from Luke the story of Mary and Joseph, the shepherds, the angels proclaiming peace on earth. Jesus came not to kings and palaces, he said, but to the lowly, the outcast. He comes to us here, in this hidden place, because His kingdom is for all who believe. His words sealed my decision. When he finished, I asked to speak. The group fell silent as I stood, pulling out my phone. I set it to record, propping it against a wall. Confusion rippled through the room. I took a deep breath. My name is Zainab Taijik, I said, watching the shock register on faces that had known me only as a quiet attendee. Daughter of Emir Faisal Taijik. I have been coming here for months. I have found Jesus Christ, and He has changed my life. I spoke to the camera about the underground church, the believers from Pakistan, India, Kenya, Somalia. I described their risks, their faith. I called for religious tolerance in Afghanistan, for the right to worship without fear. I declared I would hide no longer. The video ran 4 minutes and 20 seconds. When I stopped, silence hung heavy. Sarah had tears in her eyes. Pastor Joseph looked grave but nodded. I didn't mean to endanger you, I said quickly. I'll blur your faces. Remove any identifiers. Pastor Joseph stepped forward, clasping my hands. We are not afraid. You have been bold for the gospel. Jesus will honor that. We prayed in a circle, hands linked, asking for God's shield. Then I left, legs unsteady, heart full. That night, in my room, I edited the video meticulously, blurring every face but mine, adding captions. I stared at the upload button for hours, weighing the cost, family, status, life itself. Then I thought of Sarah's hidden cross, Pastor Joseph's whispered sermons, the boy's innocent play, of a savior born in a stable. I uploaded to Instagram, then X, then YouTube. Notifications flooded in. Views climbed. By morning, it was viral. The storm was coming. But in that moment, I felt free. The upload changed everything in an instant. Notifications poured in like a flood, likes, shares, comments ranging from encouragement to outrage. By dawn, the video had over 50,000 views. International media picked it up quickly. Afghan elite declares Christian faith in viral video, heiress calls for religious freedom amid persecution claims. My name trended globally, but inside the Taijik compound, silence reigned like a predator waiting to strike. That quiet terrified me more than any explosion could. I lay in my bed that Christmas night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second. Sleep evaded me completely. My mind raced through scenarios. Father discovering it first, aunts whispering, security forces arriving. The comments I glimpsed before muting my phone were a mixed support from human rights activists, prayers from Christians worldwide, venomous threats from hardliners calling me a traitor to Islam and Afghanistan. I turned off my device, buried it under my pillow, and prayed, Jesus, if this was your will, protect us. Protect the group. The storm broke at precisely 5:32 a.m. I know because I was wide awake, counting minutes like a prisoner awaiting judgment, which, in a way, I was. Heavy boots echoed down the marble halls, multiple pairs moving with military precision. My door didn't open. It burst inward, the lock shattering under force. 3 men in dark tactical gear stormed in, family enforcers, the private security that answered only to my father and the elite circle. They said nothing. No questions, no accusations. 2 grabbed my arms, hauling me from the bed in my nightclothes. I didn't resist. Shock froze me. They dragged me through familiar corridors, now alien in the dim light, past ancestral portraits, ornate rugs, servants who melted into shadows, averting eyes. Word spreads fast in compounds like ours. Everyone knew. They took me to a rarely used wing, one reserved for family matter disputes, interrogations, things not spoken of in polite company. They shoved me into a stark room. Bare concrete walls, a single wooden chair, flickering bulb overhead. No windows, no comfort. The door slammed shut, locked with a resounding click that vibrated in my chest. I sat for hours, or what felt like it. No food, no water, just the hum of the light and the chill seeping through my thin fabric. My mind turned to Scripture. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Psalm 27. One pastor Joseph had taught. I whispered it like a mantra, clinging to the words. The door opened again. My father entered, Emir Faisal Taijik, clad in his impeccable salwar kameez, face a mask of controlled fury. I had seen him angry at business rivals, at political setbacks, but never like this. His eyes held no recognition, only revulsion, as if I were a stain on his legacy. He stood in the threshold, silent, letting the weight press down. Then he spoke, voice low and edged like a blade. I have viewed your abomination 12 times. Calls have come from tribal leaders, from mullahs, from the government itself. You have dragged our name through filth, Zainab, betrayed our blood, our faith, our nation. I tried to respond, to explain the void I'd felt, the fullness Jesus brought, the injustice faced by believers like Sarah and Pastor Joseph. But he cut me off with a raised hand, sharp as a command. Explanations are irrelevant. You have one chance to salvage this. Record a retraction. Claim Western manipulation, mental strain from your time abroad. Denounce this infidel nonsense. Reaffirm your devotion to Islam. Beg Allah's mercy and the nation's forgiveness. We might exile you quietly. Erase this shame. He waited, eyes boring into mine. I thought of him in softer times, teaching me to ride horses in the compound stables, calling me his little star when I excelled in school. Now that man was gone. No, I said, the words steady despite my trembling. I cannot deny Jesus. He is the truth that freed me. His face twisted emptiness, giving way to rage. He stepped close, breath hot on my face. You are no longer Taijik, no daughter of mine. Your name is stricken from our records, your image purged from every memory. You are dead to us, have been since that video. He turned and left. The door locked. I didn't cry, then numbness held the tears at bay. Dead. To my own father. To the only world I'd known. Time blurred in that room, hours, days. They brought water in a cracked cup, flatbread stale enough to choke on. Guards patrolled outside, their murmurs filtering through, calling me murtad, apostate, debating my fate like market gossip. I prayed ceaselessly, not for escape, but endurance. I recited verses. Matthew 5. The Beatitudes, blessed are the persecuted. Jesus had foretold this family's divided, hatred for his name's sake. I had studied it, now I lived it. On what I guessed was the fourth day, different men arrived. Not family security, but officials in uniforms marked with religious authority, the morality police, enforcers of Sharia. They blindfolded me, bundled me into a van with tinted windows. The drive twisted through Kabul's chaotic streets, perhaps an hour, disorienting turns to confuse me. When the van stopped, they yanked me out into harsh sunlight. My eyes, adapted to dimness, burned. Through the blur, I recognized the infamous silhouette. Dasht-e-Barchi prison, a fortress-like complex west of Kabul where dissidents vanished, where enemies of the faith met grim ends. Gates clanged shut behind me. Processing was dehumanizing, fingerprints smudged on ink pads, mug shots under glaring lights, a number tattooed on my wrist replacing my name. They stripped me of my clothes, issued a rough gray jumpsuit, then marched me to a cell in the high-security block. The cell was a tomb 2 meters square, a soiled mat on stone floor, a bucket for waste, a slit window high and barred, offering only slivers of sky. Walls bore scars, scratches, tallying days. Desperate etchings in Pashto and Dari. Guards communicated minimally. Eat now, lights out, silence. I demanded charges, a hearing rights. They sneered. Apostates get no trials. They get justice. The word chilled me, apostate. Under strict interpretations of law here, it meant death, stoning, shooting, whatever the tribunal decreed. Days melted in isolation. No clock, no calendar, just light shifts through the slit. Guards shared nothing of the outside. Was the group safe? Had international outcry mounted? Did Emily know my mind tormented me? Replaying choices, questioning worth. Doubt slithered enduring nights. Was father right? Had I been fooled? Should I have recanted? But then I'd recall that room floor surrender. The peace transcending logic. Jesus was real. My faith, too, even if it killed me. Around my 12th day, they fetched me, shackled, led through dank halls to a chamber with a scarred table and men in clerical robes, mullahs, scholars, Sharia experts. No introductions, no seat offered. I stood as they murmured over papers. The eldest, bearded and severe, read charges in formal Dari. Apostasy, blasphemy against Allah and the Prophet, propagating Christianity, dishonoring the elite and nation, each punishable by death. Do you comprehend? He intoned. Yes. Do you repent? Return to Islam? Seek absolution. I thought of father's ultimatum, the easy erasure, of Sarah's faith, Pastor Joseph's courage, the boy's trusting eyes, of Jesus on the cross, forgiving executioners. No, I said. I cannot deny the truth that saved me. He paused, then noted something, conferred briefly. Guilty. Sentenced death by firing squad. Within 20 days. Guards hauled me back. I didn't struggle. Jesus, I trust you, I whispered. Back in the cell. Reality sank in. 20 days. I scratched marks on the wall. 19, 18. Each dawn a step closer to end. Appetite fled. I wasted away. Body frail but spirit oddly resilient. I prayed fervently for courage, not rescue, to die faithfully. Nights brought deepest battles, darkness, amplifying isolation, whispers of abandonment. But I cling to Hebrews 13 verse 5. Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. The eve of execution, weakness consumed me. Tomorrow, guards, courtyard, bullets. I knelt on cold stone, praying aloud, heedless of eavesdroppers. Psalm 23 cycled, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Exhaustion claimed me. In half sleep, the cell warmed unnaturally. Darkness glowed golden. A figure appeared robed in radiant white. Face familiar yet ethereal. Jesus. Tears flowed in awe. He smiled, love incarnate. He spoke my name. Zainab, it resonated like purpose. You are my beloved, he said. Your story continues. Tomorrow brings freedom, not death. He touched my forehead, warmth healed. Fear vanished. Then he faded. I slept peacefully, trusting his promise. The video's impact was immediate and overwhelming. As I lay in the darkness of my bedroom that Christmas night, my phone vibrated incessantly with alerts. I had turned it to silent, but the screen lit up like a beacon, showing thousands of views accumulating by the minute. Shares spread across social media, comments flooding in from every corner of the world. Some were supportive, praising my courage and calling for change in Afghanistan. Others were vicious, labeling me a betrayer, a Western puppet, deserving of the harshest punishment. International headlines began to emerge. Afghan heiress converts to Christianity in defiant videos. Zainab Taijik risks, all for religious freedom. But within the walls of our family compound, there was only an ominous quiet, a calm before the inevitable tempest. That silence kept me awake, my heart racing as I waited for the repercussions I knew were coming. The unleashing came at exactly 5:32 a.m. I remember the time because I was staring at the clock on my nightstand, unable to sleep, my mind replaying the upload over and over. The compound was still shrouded in pre-dawn gloom when I heard the footsteps, heavy, deliberate, multiple men moving with urgency through the halls. My door didn't open gently, it was forced inward with a crash, the frame splintering as 3 figures in black tactical uniforms burst into the room. These were not ordinary guards. They were the elite enforcers my father employed, trained to handle threats discreetly and without question. They didn't speak a word. No demands, no explanations. One shone a flashlight in my face, blinding me momentarily, while the others seized my arms and pulled me from the bed. I was still in my sleepwear, a simple cotton gown, but they allowed no time to dress or gather belongings. My phone was snatched from the nightstand, and I was dragged barefoot through the corridors I had known since childhood, past the grand foyer with its intricate Persian rugs, past the family portraits that now seemed to stare in judgment, past servants who pressed against the walls, their eyes downcast in fear or shame. Whispers followed us, news traveled like wildfire in places like this. Everyone already knew what I had done. They took me to the secure wing of the compound, a place I had only heard rumors about, a series of rooms used for interrogations, detentions, matters the Taijik family resolved internally before involving authorities. The door to one such room swung open, revealing bare walls, a single metal chair bolted to the floor, and harsh overhead lighting that buzzed like angry insects. They forced me into the chair, bound my wrists with zip ties, and left without a glance. The door locked with a finality that echoed in my soul. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, the cold metal biting into my skin, the light stinging my eyes. No water, no blanket, no indication of time passing. My thoughts turned to prayer. "Lord, give me strength," I whispered, recalling the words from Philippians 4 verse 13 that Pastor Joseph had shared. "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." I repeated it, letting it anchor me amid the uncertainty. Finally, the door creaked open. My father stepped in, Amir Faisal Taijik, his presence filling the room like a shadow. He wore his usual attire, a tailored salwar kameez, but his face was unrecognizable, etched with a coldness I had never seen directed at me. He closed the door softly, the click louder than any slam, and stood there, arms crossed, studying me as if I were a stranger. The silence stretched, heavy and accusing. Then he spoke, his voice calm but laced with venom. "I have watched your video 15 times, Zainab. Calls have poured in from elders, from religious leaders, from allies in the government. You have brought disgrace upon the Taijik name, a stain that may never wash away. You have mocked our heritage, our faith, everything I raised you to honor." I opened my mouth to respond, to tell him about the transformation in my heart, the love of Jesus that had filled the emptiness of my privileged life, the injustice I could no longer ignore. But he silenced me with a sharp gesture. "Do not speak. Your words are poison now." He paced slowly, his steps measured. "You were given everything education in America, freedom few Afghan women know, a future secured by our bloodline. And this is how you repay it, by embracing the faith of infidels, broadcasting it for the world to see." He stopped, facing me directly. "You have one opportunity to mitigate this catastrophe. Record a new video. Declare that you were influenced by foreign agents, that stress from your studies clouded your judgment, that you suffer from delusion. Renounce this Christian heresy. Reaffirm your submission to Islam, and plead for forgiveness from Allah and the people. We can arrange for you to disappear, perhaps to Europe, under a new identity. The family might forgive in time." His offer hung in the air, a lifeline wrapped in chains. I thought of the cost betraying Jesus, denying the peace he had given me, abandoning the believers who had become my true family. I thought of Sarah's unwavering faith, Pastor Joseph's teachings, the little boy's innocent trust during our Christmas gathering. "No, Baba," I said, my voice steady despite the fear. "I cannot lie. Jesus is my Lord now. He has set me free, and I will not turn back." The change in him was instantaneous. The composure shattered, replaced by raw hatred. His face contorted, veins bulging as he leaned in close. then you are no longer my daughter. You are not Taijik. Your name will be erased from our histories, your photographs destroyed, your existence denied. You are dead to me, to all of us from this moment. The words landed like blows, each one severing the ties of blood and memory. He straightened, composed himself, and walked out. The door locked again. Only then did the tears come, hot and silent, as the reality sank in. Disowned, erased, alone. Hours passed in that room, or perhaps days. I lost track in the windowless void. They provided minimal sustenance, a cup of water, a piece of dry bread pushed through a slot in the door. Guards outside muttered about me, their voices carrying fragments apostate. Shame on the family. She'll get what's coming. I prayed without ceasing, drawing on every scripture I had memorized. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me, from Matthew 5. It was no longer abstract. It was my reality. On what I believe was the second day, the door opened to new faces, men in official uniforms, badges marking them as religious police, the feared enforcers who patrolled for violations of Islamic law. They unbound me only to shackle my wrists and ankles, then blindfolded me and led me out. I felt the shift from the compound's air-conditioned halls to the outside chill, then into a vehicle. The engine roared, and we drove for what seemed like 40 minutes, the road bumping over cobble's uneven streets. When the blindfold came off, I was in a processing room, harsh lights, metal tables, officials with clipboards. They treated me like any criminal. Photographs from every angle, fingerprints pressed into digital pads, personal details logged. My name was replaced with a number, prisoner 7482. They stripped me of my clothes, issuing a baggy gray uniform that hung like a shroud. Then, escorted by armed guards, I was taken deeper into the facility. I recognized it from whispered stories and news reports. Dasht-e-Barchi prison, a sprawling complex known for holding political prisoners, religious deviants, those who challenged the order. The cell they assigned me was in the isolation wing. Cramped, dank, with a thin pallet on the floor, a foul-smelling bucket in the corner, and a narrow window slit offering only glimpses of barbed wire and sky. The door slammed shut, and I was alone with my thoughts. The guards were cruel in their indifference. They brought meals sporadically, watery stew, moldy bread, and barked orders: eat, sleep quiet. I asked for a lawyer, a phone call, information on charges. They left. Trials for apostates, you get the sword or the bullet, girl. That's your right. The isolation gnawed at me. No contact with the outside. No news of the group's fate, or if my video had sparked change. Doubt crept in during the endless hours. Had I been foolish? Was this the end? But faith sustained me. I sang hymns under my breath, recited psalms, clung to promises like John 16 verse 33, in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. After what I counted as 8 days marking sunrises through the slit, they came for me again, shackled and escorted through twisting corridors to a tribunal room, a long table, 5 men in robes, mullahs with stern faces, holy books before them. No defense, no witnesses. I stood as the head mullah read the charges: apostasy, blasphemy, inciting religious discord, shaming the nation. Do you repent? He asked. I refused, affirming my faith in Jesus. Guilty, he declared. Death by firing squad, to be carried out within 15 days. Guards dragged me back. The sentence echoed death. But strangely, peace remained. Jesus had faced worse. I would trust him to the end. The night before my execution, terror gripped me like never before. My body, weakened from days of sparse food and endless isolation, trembled uncontrollably. I had grown thin, my bones protruding under the gray uniform, my strength sapped by the constant chill and despair of Dasht-e-Barchi prison. Tomorrow at dawn, the guards would come. They would march me to a barren courtyard I had only imagined in nightmares, bind my eyes perhaps, and a firing squad would end it all. Bullets would tear through me. and I would be gone either into the arms of Jesus or into nothingness if my faith had been a delusion. I had heard whispers from other prisoners through the walls. Executions were swift here, no lingering pain, just a sudden blackout, but I didn't know if that was mercy or myth. All I knew was that in mere hours my life would cease, and I wondered if I would have time for one last prayer, one final whisper of trust. I knelt on the unforgiving concrete floor of my cell, the same posture I had taken that transformative night in my bedroom when I first surrendered to Christ. It seemed fitting a full circle. I began praying aloud, my voice starting as a whisper but growing bolder. What did I have to lose? The guards could hear, let them. They couldn't kill me more than once. I recited Psalm 23, the words grace know. Sarah had taught me in our hidden gatherings. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. Those verses were meant for valleys like this, for the shadow of death itself. I was deep in that shadow now, and I needed my shepherd more than air. I prayed for hours, cycling through every scripture etched in my memory, every hymn we had sung in that modest house, every promise Jesus had made to his followers. I prayed for Sarah, for Pastor Joseph, for the entire group. Had they been rounded up because of my video? Were they in cells like mine, facing their own sentences, or had they escaped, scattering to safer shadows? I asked God to shield them, to bolster their faith, to let my boldness inspire rather than endanger. I prayed for my father, my mother, my grandmother who had spoken of submission under the pomegranate tree. Forgive them. Jesus, open their eyes to your love, the same love that found me in my emptiness. Let them see beyond the walls of tradition. I even prayed for Emily in Houston, my steadfast friend who must have been frantic, scouring news reports for any sign of me. Comfort her, Lord, when she hears of my end. Use my story for your glory. Turn my death into seeds of faith for others. Exhaustion finally overtook me. I collapsed onto the thin pallet, still murmuring prayers, my eyes heavy but sleep elusive. I hovered in that liminal space between wakefulness and dreams, aware of the cell's damp walls, the distant clangs of prison life, but also sensing a subtle shift in the air. The temperature in my cell rose gradually, not oppressively, but comfortingly, like emerging from a cave into sunlight. I opened my eyes, expecting the usual dim glow from the corridor light seeping through the bars, but the darkness had transformed. A soft, golden radiance emanated from nowhere and everywhere, growing steadily brighter, illuminating the scratches on the walls, the bucket in the corner, my own frail hands. My heart pounded. Was this a hallucination born of starvation and stress? Had my mind finally fractured? Then I saw him, a figure materialized in the corner where shadows had reigned moments before. He was clad in white robes that shimmered with an inner light, purer than any fabric I had known. His face was both intimately familiar and indescribably profound features that seemed to hold the essence of compassion, wisdom, and authority. Eyes that pierced to my core, seeing every hidden doubt, every moment of joy and sorrow. Yet there was no judgment in his gaze, only an overwhelming peace that washed away my fear like a tide erasing footprints in sand. I knew him instantly, not through announcement or spectacle, but through a recognition deep in my spirit, the way a lost child knows her father's voice. This was Jesus, the Jesus I had read about in my concealed New Testament, the one I had surrendered to on my bedroom floor, the Savior I was ready to die for. He was here, in this forsaken cell in Dasht-e-Barchi, standing before me as real as the stone beneath my knees. Words failed me. My mouth moved soundlessly, tears streaming down my cheeks, not from sorrow or terror, but from an awe so profound it ached, a gratitude that overflowed every boundary of my heart. Love poured from him, shattering the remnants of my defenses, healing wounds I hadn't acknowledged. I fell to my knees before him, not out of duty, but because his presence commanded it wholly. loving, glorious beyond comprehension. He spoke. His voice resonated through my entire being, echoing in my chest, my bones, my soul. It was powerful yet tender, universal yet personal, as if the cosmos had focused solely on this moment, on me. He called me by name Zainab in his utterance. It sounded transformed, like a destiny fulfilled, a purpose unveiled, a cherished declaration written in eternity. "You are my daughter, my beloved," he said. "You are a witness to a people longing for my light. Your journey is not ended. Chains cannot bind what heaven has redeemed. Tomorrow will bring not death, but deliverance. You will live to proclaim what I have done." I wanted to remain there eternally, basking in his presence, forgetting the cell, the guards, the looming dawn. But he continued, his words imprinting on my heart. "Rest now without fear. Trust me fully. When morning comes, you will walk from this place not in defeat, not in bonds, but free." He offered no details, no plan, no timeline, no human intervention explained. Just a promise, simple and absolute. And in that promise, doubt dissolved. If Jesus declared my freedom, it would come. The how was his, the faith was mine. He extended his hand, touching my forehead gently. Warmth surged through me, a healing fire that mended not just my weakened body, but deeper fractures, fears, regrets, the pain of disownment. Strength flooded my limbs, peace saturated my mind. The anxiety that had plagued me for weeks evaporated like dew under the sun. Slowly, his form began to fade, the glow dimming, the warmth lingering as the cell returned to its ordinary shadows. But I was forever changed. I lay back on the pallet, closed my eyes, and for the first time since my arrest, I slept deeply restful, dreamless, enveloped in divine assurance. When I awoke, faint light filtered through the slit window. Dawn had arrived, execution day. I should have been paralyzed with dread, but calm enveloped me, a certainty rooted in his words. Jesus had promised deliverance. I would witness its unfolding. Hours ticked by. I waited for the guard's approach, the jangle of keys, the barked commands. But nothing came. Morning stretched into midday. The usual routine disrupted. Then, commotion erupted in the corridor, shouts, hurried footsteps, papers rustling. Something was amiss, something extraordinary. My cell door swung open abruptly. A guard stood there, bewildered, gesturing wildly. "Out! Now!" Behind him, chaos reigned. Officials scrambling, phones ringing, orders flying. He led me through halls I hadn't traversed since arrival, past inmates peering curiously, past whispering wardens, past bureaucrats avoiding my gaze. In the processing area, someone thrust my original clothes at me, along with my phone and few possessions. "Sign here," they demanded, shoving forms I barely scanned, releases, expulsions. Then, to a side exit, where daylight blinded me. I stepped out, legs unsteady on free ground, lungs filling with unconfined air. A nondescript van idled nearby. A man in civilian clothes opened the door. "Embassy," he said curtly. "Get in. Quickly." I complied, the van speeding away. Glancing back, Dasht-e-Barchi reseated the site of my intended death, where Jesus had entered and orchestrated my exit. The ensuing hours blurred. The embassy compound, diplomats in urgent huddles, calls to Washington, documents stamped. My video had ignited a global uproar, protests, petitions, diplomatic pressures from human rights groups and governments. Negotiations at the highest levels had secured my release from Afghanistan, citizenship revoked, permanent banishment. My family had formalized the disownment, but I lived, breathed, free. Within 36 hours, I boarded a flight, leaving behind the land of my birth, the compound of my youth, heading to an uncertain future. Emily awaited at Houston's airport, rushing to envelop me in a tearful hug. We clung together, laughter mixing with sobs, friends reunited, one from everyday life, one from the brink of death. Recovery was arduous. Securing asylum, finding housing, processing trauma. Nightmares plagued me, phantom shackles, echoing gunshots, guards' taunts. But Jesus remained near, the same one who visited my cell, fulfilling his vow. I began sharing my testimony in small fellowships, then auditoriums, podcasts, global forums. The video amassed millions of views. Letters poured in from seekers, doubters, believers inspired. I continue today, proclaiming his intervention, advocating for the persecuted. The path is fraught with threats, lost ties, skepticism. Some deem me fanatic, others idolize. But I recall that cell, his touch, my name on his lips, the promise kept. I persist, trusting the one who entered my prison and led me to liberty. If you doubt Jesus' reality, know this. He appeared in my darkest hour when death loomed. He can appear for you not for merit, but love. While lost, he loved me still, dying to prove it. That message I carry. Jesus saves, delivers, is real.